You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
It's time for the DragonCon Report, your go-to show for both newbies and seasoned pros gearing up for the annual Downtown Atlanta Convention, with interviews, expert advice, and all the latest updates straight from the dragon's mouth and fans themselves. Stay tuned, you might just uncover something unexpected.
Howdy, and welcome to the freaky fourth episode of the 2026 DragonCon Report. I'm Mike Gordon, and I'm joined by the rest of our slightly mad crew. Jen and Channing are both here.
Surprise!
Yes, very nice. Very nice.
Channing was looking down, so he missed it.
I think he missed the new intro.
Look, somebody's got to get the word out about these other groups. That's what I was doing. I'll catch it on the replay.
But nice work once again, Jen.
Thanks.
So keeping us all moderned up, I guess.
Trying.
Yes.
In a little while, we're going to get spooky with the folks from the horror and urban fantasy tracks at DragonCon. So appreciate that. But how are you guys doing? It's now April, right?
Yes.
The end of April, and DragonCon's still coming.
Prepared is the opposite of what I am. I am not prepared at all for anything. So if you all just see me wandering around in a haze, you'll know why.
I started thinking of different costumes I can make because we're driving this year.
Woohoo!
Relationships will be tested.
How long of a drive is that actually?
It's about 16 and a half.
Whew. Yeah.
And we're gonna do an all-nighter. We're gonna start driving on Tuesday.
Wow.
Now, do you have all the Buc-ee's locations mapped out along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I live where Buc-ee's is from, so we're not as obsessed with it. We stop for it, typically because the bathrooms are cleaner, but it's not necessary. The main thing is I can shop here and not have to buy my rum downtown Atlanta.
Oh, I see. Yes.
That's going to save you like $1,000 right there.
Yeah.
So look for Little Bit's truck full of rum driving through from Texas to Atlanta.
This sounds like a reboot for Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah, absolutely. So forgive me for the listeners and viewers out there. My voice is a little rough. I was at a smaller convention this past weekend, Stellarfest, which is a great little show that is here in the Atlanta area. And I saw a lot of familiar faces. And yes, a lot of the conversation did go towards DragonCon, saying like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it's we're going to get there right away. Like it's going to be here before we know it, really. So, but we're here to help you out with everything we can in between now and when it gets here. We are a proud member of the ESO Network. On the esonetwork.com page, there's a direct link to our TeePublic store filled with all kinds of cool swag, including a very cool design for the DragonCon Report podcast. We also have a Patreon page where supporters can access our exclusive readings of this month's DragonCon guest announcements. And there's some big ones this month that we can butcher. I mean, reveal. Thank you, patrons, for all your support. In addition to the video stream on Facebook or YouTube, however you're watching us right now, there's an audio version of our show, which is still available at all the usual places. You can access all our past episodes at dragonconreport.com. And however you access our show, please like, subscribe, and share. We really do appreciate you. And you can leave us direct feedback at dragonconreport.com. And we're also available on Facebook and the Instagram. Let's get started with some news and notes. Not a lot of huge news.
Been a quiet couple of weeks.
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, except for
Been a
guest
quiet
announcements.
couple of weeks.
There have been some bigger guest announcements. there have been some bigger guest announcements, but just to go over the basics, in case this is your first time watching us or listening to us, or you're not familiar with DragonCon. DragonCon does happen in the Atlanta area, and it's happening this year, September 3rd through the 7th, which is Labor Day weekend. 5-day memberships are currently $165 for all 5 days. That's still, I think, amazing. If you want to participate, attending artist and guest applications are still open until the end of May. Fan table applications are also open as well. I think they close on June 30th. The media applications, do we know if they're open yet or not, Jen? They were supposed to be open around the 15th.
They now are open.
Okay, so media applications. So if you're a blogger, YouTuber, social media, any kind of social media, you can apply for a media application, a media badge.
Well, I let's be more specific. It's not any type of social media. You do have to be with an outlet, and you do have to reach a certain threshold of subscribers and post regular content. And of course, if you get accepted, you do have to submit your content to them. You can't just do one piece. You are expected, to put it to work.
So yeah. If you're live streaming during the con, that's not really considered media, right? Per se.
I don't want to answer that because I don't know how they treat live streamers.
Gotcha.
I do know there are some people who report live from con. I think they also put together, recap videos and write up reports and stuff like that as well.
Gotcha.
But I am not sure if somebody who somebody live stream from con every day. I'm not sure.
I would say that's why there's an application process.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
There you go.
So that application app is open now. So
Yes.
If you're interested, you can check that out. And always volunteer applications are open, and there's still a lot of spaces and a lot of volunteer needed, a lot of help needed for all departments.
Yes. And speaking of applications, the DragonCon Burlesque Glamour Geek Review, try saying that 3 times fast. They've extended their applications until May 1st. So guys, we have time to get our group act together if you've got plans. I'm still waiting for May to get back to me on the possible stage name.
Yeah. Well, I know that, the Mongoose has probably already been accepted, and probably the Mongoose is going to strip down to the mask.
I think he was trying to plan something, but it just depends on what the what Atlanta Police Department will let him get away with on stage. He likes to push boundaries.
I see. Because I don't think there's a conflict there between the wrestling and the burlesque show. I think they're on two different nights. So you could get a double bill of Mongoose.
Last year the Mongoose was at the Tiki Party. I think that does overlap with wrestling. So.
That does overlap with wrestling. Yeah. He'll be probably a bruised up burlesque dancer if he does wrestling and then does burlesque the next day. It could get a little tricky.
Well, thank you for keeping an eye on the. Thank you for keeping an eye on the burlesque show.
Yeah.
I can't even respond to that one. I was trying to be serious about this, but it's a tough job. But thankfully, my wife understands.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there. For fans of T-shirts, I've got some good news for you. Oh, Jim.
Nope. Go ahead.
All right. I've got good news for fans of T-shirts. The winner of DragonCon's T-shirt tournament was the artwork from the very first DragonCon way back in 1987. The shirt will only be available until June 15th, and it will not be sold in person or at any other time. You can get yours now at the link that Jen is about to put up on screen. And there it is.
And on your screen right now is the winning T-shirt design as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for those listening, go check it out. It's all posted on DragonCon's social media as well, because you can get it at I believe it's at the official store, right?
Yeah.
So
Nostalgia
it's a pretty cool
wins.
design, and I think because it's the 40th anniversary, I think this was the pretty much, if you were going to put money on which shirt design was going to win, I would have put money on this one. I mean, there were some better ones that I think looked better artistically, if I may say that, but this one just has that feel to it, and it's the hardest to get, I would imagine. Like if you want to get an original one,
Well, I'm
Right.
glad, the quality of t-shirt fabric is a lot softer these days
Oh yeah,
than
yes.
than
Yeah, I'm
1987.
sure it's a better shirt. Period. Yes, but because Dragon Con
Not
shirts,
quite as
they're pretty
itchy
good.
anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wearing
Thick.
my official Dragon Con shirt now, and they are very comfortable. Like the official Dragon Con folks know how to make a shirt.
And a hoodie.
And
The last year's hoodie is so soft. It's the softest hoodie I've ever owned. It's so cozy enough to sleep in. And as Mike mentioned, yeah, you can catch us reading off all the recently announced guests on bonus DragonCon report offerings. I'm blanking on the word over on our Patreon, but just as a tease, they have been announcing guests from both Winona Earp and Battlestar Galactica. So you know what that means. BSG fans, the Fleet Party might be back, which has always been a good time. Earlier today, Eddie McClintock posted that sadly he will not be returning to Con this year. He did clarify that it's because Con is not covering Warehouse 13 content. But you never know. There's been plenty of celebrities who have just decided to come and hang out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can think of Battlestar Galactica guests who've done that in the past when they weren't officially announced. But that also means Tony Gowell, our beloved Tony Gowell, who works at the Dragon Con office, he has moved out of the States, so he will not be there hosting the masquerade this year. But, again, things can change. There might be a surprise. Who knows?
Yeah,
but
so we're going to keep an eye.
There could be new hosts for the masquerade. Right. We won't know till Con gets closer.
Yeah. Let's keep an eye on
if you'd like to see us host a masquerade, please contact Dragon Con directly. I think the three of us will do a great job hosting.
I think it would be a little much to have three people hosting a costume contest.
To replace Eddie and Tony, you're going to need I don't even know if the three of us could really, do that. But I mean, we could try. I'd be willing to try.
There you go.
I'd be willing to try. But yes, and as Jen mentioned, the actual specific names that have been announced are pretty awesome. And yes, we will do our best not to butcher the names too badly when we read the this month's list of guest announcements for our beloved patrons who deserve better. So we appreciate that. And on that note, I think we're going to take a quick break because that's really all the big news that we've got, news and notes. So we'll take a quick break and get spooky. All right. And then 3, 2, howdy, and we're welcome back. And now we are ready to talk all things horror and urban fantasy. And with us, we've got Derek, Carol, and DJ Ichabod. Love that name. It's so cool. Welcome to the show. I think some of you have been on before, Derek and Carol, but it's been a long time, and we're glad to have you back with us. So we really appreciate you guys for joining us, and I hope everything. I mean, I know that as the con gets closer, things get hotter and heavier as far as your workload. But you guys are already pretty much in mode, like in track mode, right?
Oh yeah, I was in track mode as soon as the database went up.
Yes, I can vouch for that. Yes, that he was indeed. Yes, and yes, I mean it's something that you start thinking about early on, but I would say, at least for me personally, that it really is probably May when it's like, okay, now you really have to get cracking. It's got, it's got to be there in front of you, not just in your head. So
let's start with you, Carol. Let's start with you. As far as what is your history with Dragon Con? When was your first Dragon Con? How did you hear about it? How did you get involved more on a track level? I'm kind of curious about your journey there.
Well, the first time I ever came to Con was in 2003, and that was specifically to see James Marsters because I'm a huge Buffy fan, was then, still am. And that was my main reason for coming. But a few years later, and typically I will clarify that the reason I didn't come more often is because at the time I was working at an all male military high school. It was mostly high school, and we didn't have Memorial Day off. When you work at a school that's a boarding school, you don't always get certain days off because you've got that population that's there all the time. So in any case, I didn't get to come that often, but I made an effort to do so that time. And then it was in the end of 2007, I got involved with an online book club I think it was called the Paranormal Book Club, that was at Barnes and Noble on their website. And Derek also got involved, and we kind of got to talking and everything. And, I guess liked what each other had to say about certain things. And he had posted at one point that, well, for people who might be interested, I'm looking for help for somebody to work with some authors, on this dark fantasy track that I'm in charge of at Dragon Con. And I was like, hey, you know what? That sounds like fun. Maybe I could work that out, at this point in time. And so that I started working with Derek on what was the dark fantasy track in 2008. So that's when I started volunteering officially, was in 2008.
Was due to Derek. Awesome. And so Derek, your experience with Dragon Con, your journey must go a little bit further back then.
Oh yeah. I've been going off and on since the 90s. And one of the biggest things that ever happened at Dragon Con for me was when I met Clive Barker in 1997. That's actually important later. But in 2005, the then chairman, Pat Henry, asked me if I wanted to take over what was at the time a goth culture track. I think they wanted me to take over because they knew I would start injecting a lot of horror content into the programming, and I did. but at first I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, because then it's going to cut into my time having fun at Dragon Con. And then I thought, wait a minute, I'm going to be programming the panels that I would want to watch at Dragon Con. So remembering the year that Clive Barker was there, I fashioned the track out of spare parts at first, but one of the first volunteers I asked was DJ Ichabod.
Yay!
So I guess that's a pretty good segue for you, Ichabod. Like, what was your experience? Was that your first sort of experience with Dragon Con, or were you familiar with the con before then?
I had heard of the con definitely before then. My brother had gone years and years ago, probably when he was in high school. But I have actually never experienced Dragon Con as a civilian. I started with Derek in 2005, and I've been there ever since, working with the horror track. So yeah, I was brought in to bring up the goth end of what we were doing. And that's blossomed in the last few years into the open casket party happening there. But nice. Yeah, I mean, I've wondered all my life, no, for the last 20 years, what it's like as a civilian, because I have no idea.
Well, now, Derek, what year was it that the track changed, that the name was changed to Dark Fantasy?
Oh, you know what? I want to say it was 2008, but I'm not sure. That was the
first year I was there then. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, the track went through many mutations. It was first the Gothic track, and then they called it Gothic Horror one year, and then it became Gothic Shadows for a couple of years, and then we became the Dark Fantasy track, and that was
and then,
I actually had a huh?
Oh, I said and then.
Yeah.
No,
and then eventually we became the horror track, because the Dark Fantasy track, I had a specific vision for what I thought Dark Fantasy was. The problem is you ask any two people what dark fantasy means, and you're going to get different answers.
You get five
Like,
different answers, right?
yes, absolutely. People thought we covered Twilight. Other people thought we covered Game of Thrones. You know, and eventually, I just the track had become so large that we needed to split into two,
Yeah.
and what happened is I suggested Carol to take over the urban fantasy aspect of things, and I think she's done a tremendous job.
So yeah, so
Well,
that leads me
thank you.
to now. Are both of your tracks right now headquartered in the Weston?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. And what would you say specifically now? Do you feel like for both of you? We'll start with you, Carol. What is if someone like me asks what your track is about? How do you define your track right now?
Well, specifically, a lot of times when people ask that, it's because they aren't clear on exactly what urban fantasy is. So the way I always explain that is that urban fantasy is differentiated from other kinds of fantasy in that it's set primarily in a recognizable real world. It may be a place that is, that maybe that's a made up name. It could be a fictional town, but it's a world that everybody recognizes, with the exception of having supernatural creatures or beings involved. But the way I describe it is that we are what we call a hybrid track and cover both books and media within the urban fantasy genre.
And Derek, what about now? Horror seems to be a bit more general as far as that title goes, and that seems like, especially nowadays, that umbrella is huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Much
It
like
keeps getting
Carol,
bigger too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We like Carol said, it's a hybrid track. We cover all aspects of horror and pop culture. So it is a balancing act. That's one of the reasons why my schedule fills up so fast, is because I have to cover so much stuff in a limited amount of time. But I like to think that I'm getting a lot of good stuff in there. So.
Not despite, but along with the name change of the track itself and sort of the evolution of that, what would you say as far as content wise has changed? Was it a lot more literary based when you started, and now it's more? I mean, certainly with horror is huge in terms of movies and streaming with Shudder and everything like that. Like it seems to be like more popular than ever. So I would imagine that. Has things changed in that regard as far as the media that you're covering?
Well, I do try to balance it out. I mean, to be honest, we don't get a lot of horror specific media guests. So I do a lot of fan panels with like YouTubers and things like that. But this isn't a hard and fast rule, but usually I put literary stuff in the mornings to about mid-afternoon, and then media stuff from mid-afternoon into the evening. So
now, as far as the subject matter itself, as far as horror and urban fantasy, and we're going to start on this question with you, Ichabod. Like what is your personal relationship? Like, when did you first started getting into Gothic and horror as a genre, whether it's music or other media?
Horror media, I would say I started as a tiny kid, probably, teasing into it with something like Scooby-Doo or something. And I think it set the tone, for me to get into things.
Scooby-Doo is the gateway.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of the things that made me, I think. Yeah. Music came later, of course. I was always into music, but the goth music thing probably came in late high school, and I really got into it in college. I think they're definitely linked. I mean, goth and horror have always had a relationship together. They kind of joined at the hip. Goth bands wrote about horror, and horror movies use goth music here and there, and they tie together. So I think, actually, I doubt many people question why goth is on the horror track. But if I have to explain it, there it is. I think they are joined at the hip topically. A lot of the same topics, a lot of the same influences coming through on all of that. So.
Well, I think you can make the case that all three of these are connected, though, couldn't you? I mean, urban fantasy, horror, yes, it all kind of.
Yeah, it's convenient that we're
definitely a dotted line between them.
Yeah, and when the dark fantasy track moved more, Derek had wanted it to become more of an exclusively horror track, to meet his vision, and one of the reasons that he had suggested, well, let's. Urban fantasy, we're getting a lot of urban fantasy authors who are showing up at con, and there's really nowhere else for them to go except the dark fantasy track. But then that meant that in order to do that, to give that kind of genre any kind of programming, it meant edging out some other things. So, splitting it off to keeping the horror track and then urban fantasy having its own space, that's kind of how that all happened. So I refer to horror as our sibling track, and it will always be that way to me because, not only are these guys my brothers in arms, but the tracks are very closely related. And if I could just say one funny thing, and Derek will remember this, and I don't know if you've heard this before, Ichabod, but when it was announced that the urban fantasy track and the horror track were going to become, these two separate things, there's an author friend of ours who said, this was on Facebook or something. And she said, oh no, she said, I feel as though my parents are getting divorced, but really it's going to be okay because one has a pool and the other one has a trampoline. So, I mean, at that point, everybody was happy with that.
But speaking of splitting off into different tracks, where would you say at least now, because media evolves, obviously, but where do you draw the line between urban fantasy and horror? But then when would you gleefully cross that line? Like, say like you're sharing a property or something as far as crossing that line goes.
Well, that's one of the reasons I was. Oh, I'm sorry. That's one of the reasons. No, I was just saying you go first. Okay. That's one of the reasons I wanted Carol to take over the urban fantasy track because I knew there would be little conflict on that. The line is very thin. I mean, at first, a lot of the books that are considered urban fantasy were actually shelved in the horror section. But to me, I think of horror as the intent to frighten. Also, there's more of an intent on more of a focus on the protagonists as victims or survivors. And in urban fantasy, a lot of times the protagonists are a lot more proactive. And that's not always the case. There are heroes in horror fiction and film as well. I mean, look at Ash from the Evil Dead series. That's maybe a good or bad example, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, we definitely share some properties. Like, for example, a couple of the shows in the Anne Rice AMC TV universe are shared by both tracks. I don't know, Carol, what do you have to say about this?
Well, and I think that that's a good explanation. I think that people expect that there is a difference in tone, and it doesn't have, it's not only to frighten, because sometimes there is some urban fantasy that can be scary and creepy as well. But as Derek said, when the intent is actually to frighten you, to scare you. And I like your differentiation there about between somebody being proactive and maybe the person who's getting chased. In an urban fantasy, you're going to have a lot of people chasing the monsters, but the monsters are not usually quite as bad as they are in horror. So, it's kind of a trade-off there. But I think that's why you have so many people who are fans of both. Why we share a lot of fans at con that enjoy, both of our tracks. It is very convenient that we are like 2 floors apart in the West, and just by the escalators, you go up 1 or you go up 2 or down 2, depending on what you're going to visit. And I think, that a lot of it just has to do with what kind of a focus people are more interested in, and what the what the interest. I think in urban fantasy, sometimes you get more of a feeling of community, perhaps, where there are sometimes the magical creatures or the supernatural beings, whatever you want to call them, are also. I mean, they're not all bad necessarily. You're going to have a bad actor amongst them because you have to have that conflict. But I think you also have situations where it's like, okay, well, I can be friends with this guy, or maybe I don't really like them, but we can work together to take down this other really bad dude or this other bad whatever. And I'm not sure that happens quite as much in horror. It seems to me as though in horror, it's usually, one person or a very small group of people who are trying to fight against the bad stuff without having a big support system. I may be wrong about that, but that's kind of my impression.
We see a lot of, we've talked to a lot of track directors, and you can see it in the programming too, that there's a lot of, overlap in a lot of different tracks. And I don't know, right. I would imagine that, obviously with the folks over at the Apocalypse Rising track, are you happy or sad that they get all the zombie material?
At first I was. I understand how that delineation came about, because Apocalypse Rising actually started when we were the dark fantasy track. So the zombie stuff didn't really fit on dark fantasy. But when we became horror, it did feel like something was missing. However, when it comes down to it, it comes down to are the zombies pre-apocalypse or post-apocalypse? For example, Walking Dead, and a lot of it too, I think, is on the focus. Like Walking Dead became about people surviving an apocalypse, whereas something like Return of the Living Dead happens before everything hits the fan. So,
That's interesting. That's cool. Carol, I want to get back to your personal stories. Carol, when did you early on? When did you first find you were attracted to this sort of material? What was there one thing in particular that you read or saw, like Scooby-Doo or something, that really just set you on this path?
Well, I can attribute a lot of my interest and exposure to my mother, who was a huge Twilight Zone fan, and Outer Limits, and Dark Shadows. I got to watch that every day after school, because yes, I am that old that I could actually watch it when it was on after school. And she was really into all of that, and so I was exposed to it very early on. I'm still creeped out by one particular Twilight Zone episode, but we won't go into that. And it was the pig face people.
I recently did a rewatch of all the Twilight Zone episodes, and what the freaky thing is about that is that so many of them are still relevant today, maybe even more so than they were when they came out back then.
Yes. And I think that, that stayed with me, so that I always had that interest. But then, it was always an interest of mine, kind of in the background, even, as a teenager and everything. And then as I got a little bit older, I was still interested in it. But I think what really kind of jump-started me was when Buffy came out. And when that was coming up, I said, this looks really good, because I had watched things that were in that kind of in that neighborhood. I mean, because as I said, I was still interested in it, but it wasn't as much of, I suppose you could say, a focus. But when that happened, I mean, I was way more into it than my kids were. I had two sons, and I mean, they thought it was fine. But I remember asking them one time. I came across something, and it was in TV Guide about, okay, which show is coolest or cooler, X-Files or Buffy? And they both were like, well, X-Files. And I'm like, what? I mean, they both watched Buffy too, but anyway, it was pretty funny. But that, I think, really got me even more into it as an adult rather than just a casual interest. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And Derek, what's your horror origin story?
Well, I've always loved monsters, but they didn't scare me. But one thing that did scare the crap out of me was Stephen Gammell's illustrations for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I like to think that those books are still contaminating young minds to this day.
I have some on shelves back here, so yes, they are.
And but for whatever reason, his art stuck with me, and I started getting a taste for the darker entertainment. I became a big horror fan in the 80s, probably the end of the 80s, after being primarily a fantasy nut. And in 1991, I actually went to the very first World Horror Convention, which was a literary-based convention. And if you look at the programming for that convention, you'll notice it looks very similar to what I'm doing now. Heavy emphasis on literary, but with media, and also a touch of goth culture. And that's pretty much my story of how I became a horror fan.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I and certainly, yeah, that's definitely I can't even remember monsters. Yeah, Creature Double Feature. I grew up with Creature Double Feature, Channel 56 when I was in Massachusetts. So every Saturday I was glued, and I watched that after I watched Scooby Doo. So
Scooby Doo was the gateway.
Harkens
That's
back
right.
to Scooby Doo. Sure. Tell us a little bit about you guys have had years and years now where you're doing these tracks. Certainly you must have some highlights, some really great stories about things that have happened in your track room. I'd be curious to hear about some pretty amazing things that happened there.
Well, the highlight for me was interviewing Alice Cooper.
That would be a big one.
I'm still surprised they let me on stage to talk to this guy for an hour, but it went well. They still show it on DragonCon TV apparently every year. So.
Right. It did. I was there. I can vouch it went well.
Now, one of my favorite times was when we had a fan panel for What We Do in the Shadows. That was immediately after a guest panel with Harvey Guillen. And he found out about the fan panel and wanted to be on it. So we sort of waited until the panel started and he walked out. And the look of delight on people's faces, I will never forget.
That's awesome. Carol, any fun stories about your track room?
Yes, well, things that are similar to that. It was one of the very first years of the Urban Fantasy track, which Urban Fantasy and then horror, officially horror, that was 2013. So this was maybe the second year. I don't think it was the first year of the track, but we were in a different room, but we were also in the Westin, and it was during a fan panel on Supernatural. It was a packed room, and I had, I think I had 5 or 6 panelists, and we were having a discussion, and then one of my panelists got up and he said, just a minute, but he wanted me to know. I mean, it didn't interrupt the panel, but he went into the audience and was speaking to someone. And then he came back and he told me, he said, Carol, he said, that's Osric Chow, who played Kevin on Supernatural, who was in costume in the audience, that he had just come to con and just showed up at the panel. But, he had asked if it would, he said, I asked him if it was okay if we point him out at the end, because this was near the end of the panel anyway. And so that people could see him. But I mean, he was dressed up in such a way that I certainly didn't recognize him. And this panelist did, because he was sitting kind of directly in front of him and was looking, he was in his eye line, in other words. So, he was able to tell. And then we had another time, there was a few years after that, we were having our iZombie, because that was a show that was covered by my track. And we were having the fan panel for that. It turned out that a woman who was in the audience somehow got, I think it was on what was then Twitter, had talked about, I'm in this, I'm in this iZombie fan panel at Dragon Con. Well, somehow, and I can't remember his name. Can you help me on that, Derek? You know who I'm talking about because you love this story, but I can't remember his name.
Rahul, wasn't it?
Yes. And he decided he wanted to know, well, can I Skype in with you? So he Skyped in and got to take part in our fan panel for a little while, as part of everything. So things like that. It is fun, and it's especially fun, for the audience. I mean, because when it happens outside of a media guest panel, which is where you expect to have those kinds of situations, when it's something like that and it's unexpected, people get pretty excited. So those were a couple of mine.
I'll tell you what, I had the pleasure, I think it was a couple years ago, to be on a panel in the horror track, and I was helping promote, because I had contributed a story to the Southern Fried Cthulhu book, and we were talking about the stories in there, and the Lovecraftian, all this stuff about Lovecraft, and talking about our stories and everything, and about 40 minutes in, I think I looked up, and in the back of the room there was Cthulhu, like right there. Like I think it was it might have been a person in a costume, but it was so jarring that I actually thought that we were going to meet our maker, because it was that's why I took a picture and I used the cover art. I used it for the cover art for this podcast, because I legitimately jumped.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And I'm like, having a spook on the horror track. I mean, that's just perfect, right? That's just perfect.
It was almost as though the panel conjured him, right? So there.
I was worried. I really was worried that we had accidentally summoned him.
Yeah.
And the question is, did Cthulhu have to stand in line to get his passes?
He had to wait in line like everybody else.
Channing, everybody has to register. You don't get anywhere without a badge.
Well, speaking of surprises, Ichabod, what's one of the wildest or most surprising things you've seen behind the DJ booth at the track parties?
Well, we did have Harvey introduce our party once, and that was cool. From What We Do in the Shadows again. That was really cool. I mean, being up there at the open casket party is kind of a crazy rush, I will say, looking out at that sea of people, but you're trying to maintain your focus on the music, so you try not to get distracted too much. You're trying to keep them dancing and whatnot. But I've done some really good large room panels that stick out for me. I got to do Robert Englund, moderate a panel with Robert Englund a couple times, actually. First time I was very, very scared. I will say,
not of him or nervous.
He was incredibly
I think
nice.
Both, Carol, right?
Yeah, probably. He's
a real pro and a real gentleman. I mean, he was really cool to me backstage, and his wife was there, I think, helping us out. Lance Henriksen was a really cool guest that I couldn't believe I was standing next to, and Julian Sands, rest in peace. Very interesting gentleman. Really, really nice beyond his, what you might think he could be like being who he is, but he was actually very down to earth. So it's been some really, really good memories through the years of doing some of those.
And being a person who obviously is playing music, how important do you think music is to the identity of horror as a genre?
Oh, as a soundtrack collector, I think it's very important. I collect a lot of horror soundtracks, and that blends into my style of DJing. Also, I like to bring in stuff from film, especially into Out of the Coffin when I do my show there. And then bring that into the Open Casket Party as well, the horror themes, and link the music and the movies and all of that together. But yeah, I think the music and horror are I don't know, some of my favorite characters on shows like Dark Shadows. The music is one of my favorite characters on the show, and the same thing with Twin Peaks, and we could talk about how those are all linked together too, but that's another conversation.
Speaking of the open casket party, for our viewers or listeners out there who've never been, what do you think makes it stand out as a must attend nightly event at con?
I think for years people wanted a goth party, that played goth music, and that was something that I had been doing for years. I run a night called Fascination Street here in Nashville, and we sort of modeled the Open Casket Party a little bit after that, and a little bit after what I do on Out of the Coffin, and then bringing in the track elements in the visuals that we show. I think it was just something that people wanted. I think it may be a must attend if you are into goth music and you want to hear stuff, from the Sisters and the Cure and Bauhaus and kind of the classic stuff that we build on, and the bands that sound like that these days that have built on that side of the goth spectrum, rather than, I think there are a lot of electronic dance parties to go to already, and we have something different.
Yeah.
So what do you, for maybe people who you just mentioned a few bands, if we could maybe get a few specific songs, if people, I've been to some events where we've asked people to play goth here in Texas, and they've played emo. So, so for maybe, and you're like, that's not goth. So what are some tracks that people might hear at Open Casket, or you could tell people who are new to goth music that you think would be a perfect representation of the genre?
That's really Ichabod on the spot here. Let's see.
Well, in order to help you out a little bit too, because I think there's some association too with, alternate music, especially from the late 80s, 90s and all that, with the Sisters of Mercy and the Cure and the Cult, and
except that like the Cure's not always goth. The Cult's
right,
not always goth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's that association that you kind of connect, and there's certainly some commonality there, but it's not just about that, right? It's not just alternative music, right?
Right. I mean, we will dip into sort of dark wave and new wave, things like that. But I mean, I'm fond of playing the Cure's 100 Years off of my favorite album from them, Pornography. And that's one of the foundation stones of what I do with Fascination Street, which is, of course, also named after a Cure song that you would be likely to hear at the Open Casket Party. I mean, the Sisters, if you like, Lucretia, that's the kind of thing. I mean, that's their most obvious track, but you're going to hear that kind of thing. You're going to hear some older stuff from Susie, stuff like Happy House or something like that you might not always hear. Cities and Dust, things like that. That's a lot of the classic stuff. But if you're into newer dark wave and goth stuff, you would hear stuff like Twin Tribes, like Nox Novacula, bands like that I think are She Passed Away, bands like that. And if you want a really good idea, actually, just check out the playlists from previous years. We've had those posted, or look at the Fascination Street playlist that we post every month also. So you can kind of see definitely what I play. And if you want to look at the previous Open Casket playlists, you can find those too, and or interact with us, make requests online.
Has the audience changed at all over the years in terms of what's expected of you, or what kind of requests that you're getting
within DragonCon, or
yeah,
within? I think it's been pretty consistent. I mean, we're heading into our 5th open casket party at this point, so it hasn't been that many years to judge the differences.
Gotcha.
But goth itself has grown a lot in the past 5-10 years on social media and just generally in culture. The explosion of goth clubs has been amazing in the last few years.
Is Dragon Con, because we've heard this from other DJs, is Dragon Con a different audience in a lot of ways, but in some ways than your normal gigs that you play?
Oh yeah. Dragon Con has its own culture to it. It's a little microcosm. It's its own little universe that exists for a week out of every year. So it's definitely got its own sort of nerdy bent to it, that little angle that comes in, and we play a little bit to that. It's not the exact same thing I would play at a goth club here in Nashville. Although I think all goths are inherently kind of nerdy. It's why else would we do this? But
now, I want to go back to something you said. You said that you like to incorporate some music from horror soundtracks into some of your shows. So are you just playing these individually, or are you mixing them with other songs, or are people really just rocking out to the Jaws soundtrack?
Not quite like that. Sometimes, songs that are tied to a film, like stuff from the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack, you can actually play in a club, something like Party Time by 45 Grave. There are a couple of danceable tracks on, say, like the first Nightmare on Elm Street. There's a couple of electronic tracks that play in sort of in the synthwave vibe. But mostly I try to draw in the horror movie content through the visuals, and then tie that in a little bit through almost kind of mood. It's kind of a little psychological angle to DJing.
Anything that gets requested more than others?
People always want to hear, the Sisters and Susie, generally, especially if they know that you're the kind of night that's going to play that and not look at them and go, that's old people music, because some clubs you go to and they're like, that's for the olds. But no, I mean, but there's a lot of new bands that sound like that too. So I think it's not for the olds.
Yeah. Speaking of requests, and this one could be for all three of you, have you been seeing any submissions or requests lately, whether it's this past year or the past few years, with for music, for the tracks that have surprised you, that they're coming to your area and requesting for it to be covered? Like maybe a show they're asking to be covered that you wouldn't consider to fall into your track, but then you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, it kind of does.
Well, the way that system, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, or is it just that or does nothing surprise you these days? When people request it.
That part is true. That at least, and I think probably Derek and Ichabod would both agree with that. But the way that the show coverage works for us is that those are actually assigned to different tracks, so people don't just randomly all think that they can do whatever they want. And one of the reasons for assigning shows to be covered by a particular track is so that when there are guest announcements, they know which track is going to actually be hosting this material. And so there aren't, 400 different people clamoring to be covering the same thing. I'm exaggerating, of course. There are only 40 tracks, but anyway, it's sometimes there are things that kind of overlap, the way that Derek was saying earlier that, when it comes to the Anne Rice Immortal Universe shows, for example, where, for what is now, I guess, the Vampire Lestat, which started out as Interview with the Vampire, was covered by his track, and Mayfair Witches is really covered more by mine, even though it has the elements of horror as well. So we can do things together, or we can do things separately, but typically shows are assigned to specific tracks, and it's not necessarily up to us. If something it's up to our programming director, and if something gets assigned that we don't particularly agree with, then, people are free to bring that up with her and say, hey, I don't think this is being covered by the right track. And the other reason for doing that is so that you don't get 5 different panels on the same show throughout con where you're splitting your audience, because people are saying, well, I'm not going to go to all 5 of these, or I'm not even going to go to 3 of these. I'll go to 1. But then that's not really fair to the other 2 people who are trying to cover it, So if it has a specific focus for one track, that's just how that works.
Well, how do you decide who gets vampires and werewolves?
Well, again,
Knife fight.
depends on what on what the approach is. I think when it comes to specifically vampires and werewolves, it's how often do you see either of those characters? And Derek, you can certainly disagree with me if you think I'm wrong here, or if you don't agree anyway. If they show more of their human side, if you're seeing more of their human side than you are the monster, then they may fall more into the urban fantasy category, because they can interact more easily with humans. If they're doing something besides tearing them limb from limb, let's put it that way. If their first reaction is only, to kill or to attack or whatever, and there isn't any, other kind of thought process behind it necessarily, then I think that's one way you can divide those up.
Well, here's a good
Derek,
example:
what do you think?
The Howling, because
Yeah.
we see the human side in the Howling, but we also see the violent side, or American Werewolf in London. Same thing.
Right.
We're, classic horror, but then we're also seeing the human side of these characters too.
I think sometimes properties are kind of grandfathered in. Like, for example, Lestat is a good example. Some people may wonder why that's on horror and not urban fantasy. I would counter that when that character was introduced, those books were considered horror. So, and I think certainly with The Howling and American Werewolf in London, those were considered horror at the time. So that's sort of my feelings on it. It's just some things are just sort of grandfathered in because that's what they were when they were introduced to the public. So
Right.
As far as I know, it's still in the early stages, but looking ahead, and is there anything that you guys feel comfortable revealing as far as programming with anniversaries coming up this year of certain genres, of certain things that you are going to make sure that you're covering this year, that you're excited to cover this year?
I am committed to doing Dark Shadows programming, at least a panel every year. I feel that is the closest thing the horror genre has to Star Trek or Doctor Who, for that matter. And this is its 60th anniversary. It's not the 60th anniversary of Barnabas Collins, but it's the 60th anniversary of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing we're going to be doing. It's also the 50th anniversary of the Interview with the Vampire, the novel. I'd like to do something on that. I try to avoid doing 5-year anniversaries, but it's the 95th anniversary of Universal's Dracula, Frankenstein, and Paramount's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which are the cornerstone of horror cinema in America.
Yeah.
So I'd like to do something on those too. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I would imagine that anything Universal Monsters or Hammer Horror is covered under your track, Derek, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I know that sometimes the Brick Track has done some Hammer Horror
right.
programming, but there's nothing saying that they have full. It's not. They don't have exclusive rights on it, I guess you could say.
Well, I don't
And
know how far along you are in programming, but just so you know, it's the 40th anniversary of Dragon Con. A little movie called The Fly is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
actually,
That's
funny you'd mentioned that. That's actually one of my favorite horror films.
Mhm.
But instead of doing an anniversary focused on The Fly, I'm looking at the broader themes of body horror and doing a
Mm,
panel about that instead. Is
I
the
like it.
plan? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I like it.
that cheerful topic. Well,
Well,
for us, this is actually the 25th anniversary of the musical episode of Buffy. So, which of course is probably one of the most famous musical episodes of any show ever, as it rightly should be. And no, I'm not the least bit biased about that. And so we are planning to do a joint panel with the unofficial theater track.
mhm.
I half of the panelists will be made up of people I'm sending, and half will be them. Just talking about that episode from a from a theater aspect, that type of a focus on it, and something else that I think will be fun. Of course, we had Winona Earp guests announced. They were the first guests announced for the con, so we're very excited about that. And something else I'll be doing, which has proven to be pretty popular, is on Friday night. I will be having some authors come and read some spooky stories, whether it's their own or someone else's. Typically, they're about 10 minutes long per person. And people seem to really enjoy that. I guess it's kind of a way to come and maybe learn about somebody you're unfamiliar with, but also just kind of sit there and, enjoy hearing these things in a way to kind of kick back and take it easy for a little bit before moving on to whatever else you're doing later that evening. We have a number of people do that. We don't have any musical entertainment to go along with it this year because both of the bands we typically use, neither of them will be at con this year. So it'll be just the spooky stories, but it'll be more people reading because of that. So that, I'm looking forward to that. That should be a lot of fun.
That sounds like it. Yeah, it does sound like fun. When you mentioned the Buffy episode, Once More with Feeling, I know that at Dragon Con that gets performed every other year. Is that still
Yes.
happening? Is that going to happen? Is that part of your track as well, or is that something else?
Yes, no, that is part of my track, and anybody else that wants to rest it will have to take it from my dead cold hands. But they will not get it. We do plan to have that put on again. Yes, that
Nice.
It used to be every other year back when there was still the Whedon track.
Oh,
But
gotcha.
when they disbanded that track in 2016, well, the AfterCon 2016, because they were taking away all single creator tracks for the most part. I mean, that were based around a person kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's why the Tolkien track got fused in with high fantasy, and why some other things went in other places. So they used to do that one year. They would do the horror picture show one year, and then they would alternate the following year with Dr. Horrible. Well, I get people asking me, well, why don't you do Dr. Horrible? And my answer is because it's not urban fantasy. Yeah, I mean, the story itself is not urban fantasy, whereas there is no way you can say that Buffy isn't. So is that? But
Pretty easy
we
answer.
tried to do it. We've been doing it. We've started doing it every year. It was, I think, in 2022 we started doing it. A couple of shows every year, and not exactly sure of the how that is going to play out this year, but we do expect to do it. So,
Awesome.
and it's always a lot of fun. Anyone who's never seen it, you should come and check it out. It is fun. And if
Awesome.
people aren't familiar with what it is, what were you going to say, Mike?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if people aren't sure what it is, basically what we do is we play the episode gets played, the DVD straight from the DVD on to screens in the ballroom. And there are people doing what they call a shadow cast, where they don't actually say anything, but they're acting out a lot of the scenes over to the side. And sometimes the things they choose to emphasize are very amusing. Let's put it that way. But the cast all does a great job. It's one of my volunteers who's the director, and she's amazing.
Awesome. Well, I've heard good things about that, and so I'm glad to see that that's happening as well, because that's one of those fun things that happens. You know, you got those few things that only happen at Dragon Con. So
Yes.
Right.
And DJ Ichabod, as far as your set list, are you already working on it? Do you have any, like, you don't have to reveal anything, but do you work on it this early, and as far as surprises that you have in store for people? Or
Yeah, I will make notes throughout the year on things like, oh, that's going to be good at the party, especially when I hear new stuff that I want to bring out, new bands. I especially want to bring in some of those, be very conscious to not just play 80s stuff. So yeah, I sort of have a running list on my laptop that I use to DJ of, you know, what I want, some of the stuff that I want to play this year. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we can't thank you guys enough for joining us and talking all about your tracks and your programming. Anything else you want people to know before we let you go?
Well,
are you guys
me,
looking for volunteers, or are you still looking for any assistance in that regard? Or
I think we're
No,
both
full up.
set.
okay,
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I'm full up on volunteers,
Oh yeah,
which is a rarity actually. But
well,
it's a nice situation to be in. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
one thing I would like people to do is just to the place where personally where there's the most news coming out about the Urban Fantasy Track is going to be on our Facebook page. Now we do have a YouTube channel. There we go. Thank you. And our YouTube channel has just over 100 different recordings, because I started during the pandemic and I just never stopped. And we have media fan panels, we have author interviews, any number of things, but that if you go there and look, you're bound to find something that you're interested in. But the Facebook page is where I disseminate the news the most often about, you know, updates and things like that.
Awesome. So that's where people can find you. Derek, where can people find you and your track online?
I have a very active Facebook page. I let people ask me questions there. And I also have an Instagram page, which I don't use as often because I don't always have photos to put up. But the best place to get news is Facebook. So
awesome. And DJ Ichabod, how can people find out what you're doing and reach you online?
Yeah, I have link trees for both of my main things. Out of the Coffin has its own link tree, and Fascination Street has its own link tree. If you're ever in Nashville, second Saturday, you can find Fascination Street there and, you know, dance with us in person. If you have anything to say about the open casket party requests or anything like that, I would encourage people to go to the Dragon Con Horror Facebook page and interact there, post requests. Certainly when we get closer to the party and that's been posted, you can just leave stuff in the comments. But also it's a great place to find out what properties we do cover. And if you're curious about, you know, where a show falls, we do get to explicitly talk about that on these tracks. So that's good.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us. It's been educational and fun. So just like your tracks, right?
Oh, thank you.
That's the goal.
All right. As we close this episode, big shout out, of course, to our station crew. Thank you, Channing.
Oh, thank you. This has been wonderful. Enjoy talking to everybody. Anybody who wants to keep up with me online, I'm at Channing Sherman on most platforms. Or you can follow my group, Black Geeks of Dragon Con, on Facebook. We're not a protest, we're a party. Come learn about some great cosplayers of color.
And Jen?
Always a pleasure to be here, doing triple duty, reading comments, checking social media, and hanging with you guys. If people want to find me,
I'm on Instagram at LilBitOdd, LILBITODD. You can also occasionally find me at least closer to con in the Dragon Con parties, meetups, and more group. I'm most active beginning in July in there when I start doing the events calendar. Or at the Dragon Con Report, or at our other show if you're a fan of Polynesian pop or tiki culture, 3 Grog Night on YouTube.
Yeah,
I love that
speaking of
title.
that, you've got a little tiki event happening pretty soon, don't you?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, if you're in
Oh,
San
yeah.
Antonio area, in 2 weeks, Saturday, May 9th, I am helping throw what's called the Sunnyside Lounge Tiki Tienda. Sunnyside Lounge is one of my weekly hangouts. It's a great tropical lounge. We've got DJ Tropicana Joe coming down from Austin. He's going to be spinning some great exotica and Polynesian tunes, and we're going to have some Texas pop art, mid-century tiki artists, Black Velvet, prints, vintage clothing, furniture, all sorts of good stuff. You can find more information about that on my Instagram, or just search for Sunnyside Lounge.
And you can find me if you just go to newlegendmike.com. There's a link tree with all the other podcasts that I'm part of, as well as all the book projects that I'm currently in the midst of producing in time for Dragon Con, fingers crossed. So we try to cover all we can with these episodes, but to keep up with the latest news, please check out the official Dragon Con website, all their social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All the fan tracks like these are active on social media, so reach out to them as well. We're a proud member of the ESO Network. On esonetwork.com, there's a direct link to our TeePublic store filled with all kinds of cool swag. We also have a patron page, and once again, thank you so much for all your support. We really do appreciate all of our patrons, and whether you're watching or listening to us, please help support us for free with a like, subscribe, or a share. And if you want to leave us direct feedback, reach us at feedback@dragonconreport.com. Thanks for listening and watching. I'm your host, Mike Gordon. And as always, it's been my pleasure. Take care, stay safe, and we will see you at the con. Stay spooky.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Dragon Con Report. Whether you're a longtime fan or joined us for the first time, we hope you've gained some valuable insights and tips to make your Dragon Con experience unforgettable. Don't forget to stay connected for more updates and future episodes. Until next time, keep learning, keep planning, and keep the con spirit alive.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.